Teacher number 2, 10th grade ELD English. We'll try to do this a little bit more quickly. Let's just throw out a few pluses.
Clear expectations with the time. I'll give you 90 seconds. I'll give you 2 minutes, and I thought they were appropriate times, and she held them to it.
I thought she was very explicit with her directions. You need to be doing this right now, and then we'll come back, and then you need to be doing X, Y, and Z. So they definitely knew at each table what exactly they were supposed to be doing.
Even the point of, I'm reading aloud, what are your eyes doing?
Yeah.
Right? Following along with the text.
I saw that kids were resourceful with using her model. I was working with a group of students, and they would look back at her model to help inform them with a different task, with a different text, to, like, well, she did this right there. So they were pulling from that model, and that's really good to see. They were being resourceful, and that's sometimes students struggle with, where do I go to help inform me of how to even complete this task, and I felt like they knew how to be resourceful.
3 quick things. She encouraged independent thought and variety amongst choices for thematic statements, as long as they backed up their choice. And she commended attempts to answer, even if they were incorrect attempts, or even incorrect answers. And then she took, for a couple students, she took some incomplete ideas and she expanded or improved them while keeping the original thought. So I think she did a good job of taking the student's thought and expanding it, not completely changing it.
One thing I noticed that was really clear to the students was when she specified that she didn't want a summary, right? She said that she wanted, what was the word she used, them to use the word reveal the conflict, right? So she didn't want them to retell the story, she wanted them to make connections. And the students were making connections from the thematic list of words to the story they were reading. So again, connections, making relationships.
A lot of positive reinforcement. What I like about what you said was, I appreciate you trying. That's awesome. It's good to see.
So acknowledging the proficient and then encouraging the ones that need to keep improving.
I've been in that class before, and some of the kids that were participating today, I've never seen participate. And the fact that they get that's awesome from that. I mean, I think that's how we continue to encourage those kids to keep trying. That's huge to me.
Yeah. I thought one thing that was really great to see for me was that they've been using a sentence frame for theme statements in this ELD class for 2 years. She's looped with them, and when she asked them about what the theme statement was, they were able to recite the frame to her. Like, the kids, they just knew it, they owned it. She didn't even need the frame up there because the kids knew what it was, and that's cool to see. It's kind of rare to see that, to someone actually take the support away and kids be able to really own it. I don't see that a ton, so that was really cool to see.
I think that was because there were steps to it, right? Like with the thematic statement structure, it was like step by step. So it wasn't too overwhelming because they would just go through the steps, and before they knew it, they had this huge, I liked that about it. How it's small tasks that add up to this big, intimidating thing.
Which goes into the cognitive engagement.
Yeah, let's go there.
Where she models it, and then they're listening, and then they kind of have to do I don't know if she said this or I just wrote this down, they do the thinking for themselves, and then they come back, kind of share their ideas, the why, and then they go on their own again.
Say that again?
The students did the thinking themselves. So she modeled, and then they did the thinking themselves, and then they came back as a group, shared the why.
Yeah, I like that it was kind of that gradual release model into working. I like that there was kind of collaborative model too. You had everyone sitting in groups, and it seemed to be intentional, or else they work really well together, because the kids weren't afraid to bounce ideas off each other. I didn't see too many kids just kind of sitting quietly and just sitting there. One group I noticed too, where I thought, I'm surprised even now that was an ELD class, just their level of knowledge about abstract concepts, and they were able to pull right away like a big idea like insecurity from something about choosing which path to go on the 2 roads. And I thought so their level of knowledge of these abstract ideas, which is sometimes very difficult to grasp for our students, it seemed to be there, and they were able to say, well, I asked them, I said, why'd you write down insecurity? Well, they directed me right to the line. This line right here shows that this person's insecure about the decision they have to make. So I thought that they were able to prove their thinking, and they didn't have a problem sharing that with a stranger, so I thought that was really cool.
And then it goes back to, you said she didn't just allow them to summarize. She made them put it in their own words, their own context.
And I think she made everybody's answer feel like valid, you know, because she was asking for their opinion, you know, and I tell my students that, hey, your opinion is always valid, even if I disagree. And, you know, some kids thought it was courage, some kids thought it was insecurity, but everybody, hey, as long as you were willing to kind of explain it and justify it, that's cool, that's good enough, you know, because we interpret things differently sometimes.
Yeah, you guys have brought it up twice, but I thought that just being, if we're going to focus on cognitive engagement, just being really explicit about, we are not summarizing right now. We broke you of that habit in the second quarter, and you guys are doing a really good job, and here's why. She could explain exactly the difference between what they were doing, what they are doing now, and why it was proficient. I mean, there was all the kids understood it, and they knew what they were not supposed to do, and what they were supposed to do. So you guys mentioned it, but I thought it was worth repeating. So she intentionally took them to a higher level of thinking.
And having that list of abstract words for thematic ideas, I think definitely got them cognitively engaged, especially for ELD, but for any students, to have something to kind of kickstart their ideas and get them thinking deeper. It's sometimes hard for them to do that from nothing. So to have that list for them to choose from, I think was very good.
Behavioral, but unless we want anything else cognitive? Okay.
The graphic organizer was something that had them behaviorally engaged because they had to be physically filling it out once they switched to that group work at the end. And then, like you mentioned earlier, Kyle, when she was reading the poem and she said, where are your eyes supposed to be right now? And they said on the paper. And then also she made it very clear that while she was reading, they were supposed to be both listening and annotating and really being engaged in that way.
What Tyler kind of talked about earlier, I think timing is huge. So to give a specific time for an allotted task, and it seemed like she knew what was an appropriate time for a task, so that time wasn't wasted, and it kept them just kind of moving through those cycles. And students, you know, I noticed that all students seem to be following along with the model, and that's sometimes hard. You got to redirect oftentimes, like, hey, this is really important if you're going to be successful later. You know, if they're not following that model, then a lot of disconnect happens afterwards. And I felt like she minimized those, or her routines had minimized those, that problem with modeling.
So do you think her choice for using a text that they had read previously, do you think that helped that?
I think it did.
Yeah, I think because it probably gave them the confidence that I already know how to do this and it was a piece that they spent a lot of time on, that Fahrenheit. So it was probably fun. It's also a little bit of cumulative review to make sure that they're going back and referencing what they already know. So I like that they used a text that they were familiar with to model that thinking process before going into something new. I thought that was a strong approach.
Yeah, it allows them to kind of concentrate on one thing. They know the book, they own that knowledge, so their thinking is specifically on this process of taking the concrete into the abstract.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree.
But I did like how she was like, I'm gonna take two groups' answers, and then one kid was like, no, I want to talk too.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're obviously eager and want to speak
Mhm.
up.
Yeah, there was the group I was sitting next to, there was 3 boys arguing about who got to share their response.
heard that.
No, I wanted, no, it's me,
Talker.
it's me. You can't talk. Like, your grammar's not as good as mine. And they're arguing over it. And I thought that showed eagerness,
That's like
attentiveness.
miracle.
They were being persistent because they came up with a good thematic idea, but they're having a hard time explaining it. And I just asked them one question, and then they just took it from there. And then argued about who got to share.
Yeah, I think I noticed that was the one student, he started an idea about social change, wasn't really there, kind of worked it through with the guys, and then came back and shared his answer out, and I think he felt confident in that, and that was really cool to see. Also, I don't know if we're talking about this right now, but an effective thing that I really liked was they'd kind of all agreed on one idea, and then the one kid just shouted out escape as his
Yeah.
own.
He wanted to
Everyone's
do
like, we're
that.
going with this, rebellion, and then he's like, escape. And I thought that was cool, and there's humor there, and I think that was cool.
I did really want her to come back to that though,
Yeah.
because she said, okay, well, you write one for that one and the rest of us will do this.
Mhm.
And then we'll have you share out, and then maybe she'll have him share out tomorrow or something, I don't know.
One thing that I noticed that I thought was really cool was on the learning objective, she didn't say students, she said scholars.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so that kind of gives students kind of, a scholar? Wow, you know? So their self-esteem, I felt was healthy, you know? They were feeling good about themselves and.
So, do you guys, if we're gonna, kind of sticking on that effective piece, so did you feel like the students felt, we said that they felt confident because they had a text that they knew they were comfortable in front of them. Do you think that as a whole, or just the kids that were talking, do you think that the whole group felt pretty confident and positive about what they were being asked to do and the amount of time they were being asked to do it? Did they feel like, do you think the kids felt confident that the teacher would guide them to where they needed to be?
I would say yes, but I also, I didn't see too much struggle or grappling, and that may be just because they own that material so much, but sometimes that struggle is good to see too, like where kids may be a little down, but they're down because they're really trying to grapple with that idea. I don't think that's a negative by any means or a positive. I think I felt like they all felt confident in it, and
Yeah, the poem, I started seeing some struggle when they started with the new material, right? Like I could see her next hour, since it's a block class, there's gonna be some kids running into some difficulties, I think.
I wondered about the decision of putting them in groups of 4 as opposed to groups of 2.
Yeah.
Maybe groups of, because I had the same wondering as I put, how are they all held accountable to talk? What is their job? What is their, and most of them were doing something, but yeah, there were those few that were just kind of sitting there and taking it all in. I think with a group of 2, you could have somebody look at the text and somebody look at the chart.
Mhm.
And, you're going through the text, you're going to put it on the chart so that they're at least both, having a little bit more of that involvement. I wonder about the group of 4. I think it worked pretty well though.
Let's do some deltas in the form of questions for teacher number 2.
Mine was kind of already addressed, like what are the roles if you have a group? Maybe she had roles and we were late, coming in. But the one table that I looked at, they were like, should I write? I don't know. They were kind of like a little confused at that point, but it's not the gist of the lesson.
Yeah.
At one point, I thought that the class was having the best discussion they'd had all period, and it was very good, and I was hearing some really good insights, and she had given a specific amount of time for them to talk, and when that time was up, she mentioned, I'm hearing some really good discussion, but I want us to bring it back together now, and I would have liked to see that go a little further, so I wondered at the time, could she have adjusted that time frame to give them a little bit longer to talk and explore a little deeper into those insights?
Well, she said, we're gonna move on, is that okay with everybody? And like 3 kids were like, yeah.
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 So I agree.
But at the same time, a lot of us always need more time. And what's the balance?
Right.
Because
Absolutely.
we have to move on, but I need you to understand this first.
That's what I was gonna say, maybe it would accumulate to maybe something like a Socratic seminar or some type of day
Yeah.
where they do get to just really dive into it and discuss.
Mhm.
And I thought the way she transitioned was effective too, because sometimes when I transition, that transition from group work to, hey, bring it back, there's some kids that,
Can't
don't
move.
make that transition, but she was really good, like, hey, we're all doing this,
Yeah.
so transitions are.
Yeah, I thought that was a routine, I think. It's like, I know they work in groups almost every day, so I think that's a pretty solid routine she has established where it's, I've got my time, here's your time and your task. You guys are working in a group, talking, now it's back up on me. So yeah, I would agree, I think that's a routine that she's established because it can be tough to make those transitions so many times throughout a class.
Oh, I was wondering how she was gonna assess the students
Mm.
eventually with this. Was this like their modeling and how setting them up for something, and then where was she going? And again, I'm not good with English classes, so I don't know what you guys do.
No, that's a good question.
Your order.
I think she was walking around and doing, and informatively assessing, like
Yeah.
what they were getting, and then I think, probably the poster, but yeah, how,
Yeah.
if it's a group thing, they're turning in one piece for the group, how is she assessing those kids individually? Yep.
I thought the group that I worked with, and I mentioned about how they were talking about insecurity, and they were discussing it too, and they were able to share with me their process for coming up with that thematic idea. I was wondering if all students, or what you guys noticed, were they having that much success, or were their students really kind of struggling with, you said you mentioned that some kids were struggling with the poem, but then I thought that would have been a good time to have called on those groups to share, to have them teach the class the process of that. So, and that might have come later too, because she was like saying that I'm hearing these things, and so I thought that would be really cool, because there's clearly students that could explain the process in a kid-friendly way to their peers.
What I mentioned kind of a little bit earlier was, I think we would all agree that the students were able to get that idea of the conflict referring back to a text they were comfortable with. So my question is, could that process have gone a little bit more quickly? Or did they own that information because she took the time to have them think and talk about it? So I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's a question at least worth asking, to say, was that 40 minutes that you spent doing that what you wanted? Did you get out of it what you wanted? Or could that have taken 15 minutes less and gotten into the...
Well, I think she mentioned that she said, I know that's really good because we read it 10 weeks ago.
Yeah.
If you read it 10 weeks ago, maybe you do want to spend
Yeah.
40 minutes on it, because, it's not like you just did this yesterday. It was 10 weeks ago, so it's good to get everybody,
Was the goal to look at the book or to do the modeling? The child
Modeling.
building?
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah.
And it seemed like there was a lot of man versus self, man versus society. There's all kinds of conflicts in that story. And then I guess sometimes what I've noticed with my students is when I have X amount of abstract ideas and all this man versus self and all these different conflicts, that sometimes it convolutes their thinking, and they get confused with all those ideas, instead of saying it was primarily, this was the major man versus, but they didn't seem to struggle with picking out the different ones that were there and then choosing which one was the most prevalent.
And how about for teacher two? Is one thing we could offer teacher number 2 that we thought would have taken that lesson over the top, or even better?
I would say roles and groups, or
Maybe smaller groups or more defined roles.
yeah.
Agree?
I thought the groups worked well. I think I always like to research and see what action research is. Try groups of 4, and it doesn't work, then I try. A lot of stuff doesn't work, and there's value in it.
The one thing I've run into with roles in English is that if you give a kid a role, that's the only thing that they'll do. I'm the writer, I don't have to think, and that's all they'll do. But not all the time, though. But some kids will just take that role on, and that's the only thing that they'll do. So, but actually, like, you could research it, right? You could do it for your first period, you could do roles, you could do 2 groups, see which one.
Just collaborate.
Yeah.
Depends on the class.
Yeah, every class
I
is
mean, some
different.
classes would work better for 4 people, maybe some others 2 people.
Yeah.
They could adapt throughout the day, depending on what you need.
So I'm writing, how have you discovered the best way to design your groupings?
Yeah.
Are there
How did she come to
roles?
that?
Are there roles? What has made you have this decision? Because she's had these kids for now 2 years almost, so